The air was thick with smoke, the sound of gunfire echoing across the battlefield. Jack, a human soldier, crouched behind the wreckage of a fallen ship, his breathing heavy. His team was advancing, pushing through the enemy defenses. They had been fighting for days, and Jack was tired. Tired of the violence, tired of the endless war. The alien Queen's army had attacked human colonies for years. Thousands of lives had been lost. The government had decided that it was time to end it, once and for all. Jack's mission was clear: eliminate the Queen and her forces. They were close. The Queen's last stronghold was just ahead. Jack's eyes scanned the horizon. The Queen's palace loomed in the distance, a dark fortress surrounded by the wreckage of fallen ships. His team was advancing in full force, ready to finish the job. This was it, the end of the war. At least that's what everyone thought. As Jack made his way through the debris, a loud explosion shook the ground beneath him. His comrades scattered, shouting commands as they rushed forward. The Queen's soldiers were still fighting back, but it was clear they were losing. The end was near. Jack's heart raced. He had seen many battles, but this one felt different. There was something about it that didn't sit right with him. The idea of slaughtering an entire race, including the Queen, weighed heavily on his conscience. He was a soldier, yes, but that didn't mean he didn't feel the cost of every life lost. The explosions continued, and Jack pushed forward, determined to do his part. He ducked behind a wall as more fire rained down from above. His comrades were already moving in, preparing to strike the final blow, and then he heard it. A sound that stopped him dead in his tracks. The Queen. She was pleading for mercy. Jack's eyes widened. He didn't know what to think. He had seen the Queen's soldiers. They were ruthless. They killed without hesitation. The Queen herself was known for her cruelty, for leading her forces with an iron fist. Yet now she was begging for her life. He crouched low, peering around the corner of the wreckage. There she was, standing in the middle of the battlefield. Her armor was battered, her face smeared with blood. The once mighty Queen of the alien army now looked small and vulnerable. Her hands were raised, palms out, as she begged her attackers to spare her life, please, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sounds of war. I beg you, spare me. Jack couldn't believe what he was hearing. The same Queen who had led her army to destroy human colonies, who had ordered countless deaths, was now pleading for mercy. His team, all around him, were focused on the immense task at hand, but Jack couldn't take his eyes off the Queen. The moment stretched on, and Jack's mind raced. Was this a trap? Was she trying to trick them? It was hard to say, but there was something in her eyes. Something that told him she wasn't lying. For a moment, everything stopped. The chaos of battle, the war cries, the gunfire, all of it faded away. Jack was alone with the Queen's plea. He could hear the desperation in her voice, the fear of what was to come. He had to make a decision that could change everything. His team was closing in on her position, ready to strike. His commander, Captain Daniels, had already given the order to finish her off. The Queen was nothing more than a target, a means to an end. But Jack wasn't sure if he could follow through. He stepped out from behind the wreckage, moving slowly toward the Queen. The others didn't notice him at first, too focused on the Queen's soldiers. Jack's footsteps were quiet, his heart pounding in his chest. He had to make a choice. Could he really kill her? Could he bring himself to end the life of someone who was begging for mercy? The Queen's eyes met his as he approached. She looked at him with a mixture of fear and hope. She wasn't looking at the other soldiers. She was looking at him. Please, she repeated, her voice shaking. I've done terrible things, but I didn't want this. I was forced to fight. Please, spare me. Jack's fingers tightened around his weapon. His orders were clear. The mission was clear. But as he stood there, staring at the alien Queen, everything inside him screamed that something wasn't right. A loud shout from behind broke his trance. Jack, what the hell are you doing? Move. It was Daniels, his voice sharp with anger. The other soldiers had noticed Jack's hesitation. They were ready to carry out the mission. But Jack couldn't move. His eyes never left the Queen's face. She was still pleading. But this time, something inside Jack changed. He didn't know what it was. Maybe it was the desperation in her eyes, or maybe it was the weight of the years of war. But Jack knew that this battle wasn't just about killing enemies. It was about something more, something deeper. Jack turned to face his captain. "I can't do it," he said quietly, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "I'm not going to kill her." Daniel's face twisted in anger. "Are you crazy? We're here to end this war, and you're going to let her live?" But Jack stood firm. "I'm not killing her. She's not the monster you think she is." The captain looked at him for a moment, disbelief in his eyes. Then, with a grunt of frustration, he turned away. "You're on your own, Jack. I'm not waiting for you." With that, Daniels and the rest of the team moved off, leaving Jack standing there. The Queen's eyes filled with a new emotion, curiosity, perhaps even a hint of gratitude. Jack knew the consequences of his decision. He had just sided with the enemy, but something told him that the war was never about enemies. It was about something more. Something. Jack stood motionless, his hands still gripping the weapon at his side, his mind racing. His team had already moved on. They were focused on the mission to eliminate the Queen and end the war. But Jack wasn't following orders. Wasn't sure what had happened in that moment when he had looked into the Queen's eyes, but something had shifted within him. The battlefield around him was silent for a moment. The sound of gunfire and explosions fading away. It felt as if time had slowed. Jack was still standing there alone with the Queen. She was no longer begging for mercy. She was watching him, waiting for his decision. "I won't kill you, Jack," said quietly. "Gah." His voice was steady, but his heart was pounding. He had made up his mind. The Queen's expression softened, but she didn't speak. She had probably heard similar words from others before. Empty promises from soldiers who didn't understand the war she had fought. But Jack wasn't like the others. He had fought in many battles, but he had always hated the violence. He hated seeing lives lost for reasons that seemed so pointless. The Queen took a step toward him, her movement slow and cautious. "Why?" she asked, her voice surprisingly calm. Jack glanced over his shoulder. His team was moving farther away. They were preparing for their next move, leaving him behind. He could hear Captain Daniels shouting orders to the rest of the soldiers, but Jack couldn't bring himself to follow them. He turned back to the Queen. "I don't believe in this war," Jack said, his eyes focused on the ground beneath him. "I don't believe in fighting just for the sake of fighting. I don't think you're the monster they say you are." The Queen tilted her head slightly, as if trying to understand what Jack was saying. "You're human," she replied, her voice filled with uncertainty. "You're not supposed to care." Jack didn't respond at first. It was true that many humans saw the Queen and her army as nothing but enemies to be destroyed. They had taken countless lives, destroyed entire colonies. But Jack had learned over the years that war wasn't so simple. People on both sides suffered, and not everyone fighting was doing so willingly. "I care because it's the right thing to do," Jack finally said. "Killing you won't change anything. It won't bring back the lives lost. It won't end the war, but maybe there's another way." The Queen's eyes narrowed slightly as if she was trying to read him. "You would risk everything." "For someone like me?" she asked. Jack nodded slowly. "I've already risked everything just by being here. Maybe, just maybe, I can make a difference by doing something different." The Queen didn't speak for a long time. She stood there, her gaze locked on Jack, as if weighing his words. Then, with a quiet sigh, she dropped her hands to her sides and looked down. "I don't deserve mercy," she whispered. Jack stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "No one does. But sometimes mercy is the only thing that can change the course of everything." For a moment it seemed like the Queen might speak again, but she didn't. Instead, she simply nodded, a small, silent gesture. Jack could see the weight of years of war in her eyes. She had led her people through battles, but it seemed that the battle for her soul had only just begun. Jack took a deep breath. "We need to leave this place before your soldiers find us. And before mine do too." The Queen's head snapped up. "What do you mean you're leaving? You're abandoning your army?" Jack shook his head. "No, I'm not abandoning anyone, making sure that this doesn't end in more bloodshed, and that means we leave together." The queen stared at him, disbelief still in her eyes. "You would protect me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not protecting you. I'm protecting us both," Jack replied. "This war needs to end, and maybe you're the key to that." The queen hesitated, but then nodded slowly. "And if I help you escape, what will I owe you?" Jack smiled, a small, rare smile.
Yeah.
"Oh, me nothing. This isn't about debts. It's about ending the cycle of violence." The queen took another cautious step forward. She was still unsure of his intentions, but there was a flicker of trust beginning to form in her eyes. Jack could feel it, a fragile connection between two people who had fought for different sides, but who now found themselves united in a common cause. "Then let's go," the queen said, her voice firm, though still laced with uncertainty. Jack nodded and began leading the way. They moved through the wreckage of the battlefield, careful to avoid detection. The human soldiers were still scattered around, but Jack knew they wouldn't look back. They had their orders, and Jack had chosen a different path. They slipped through the ruined city, keeping to the shadows. Every step felt like a risk, but Jack couldn't bring himself to regret his decision. He had chosen mercy, not just for the queen, but for himself. As they reached a hidden transport ship, Jack turned to the queen. "We'll be safe here," he said, "but we need to move quickly." The queen glanced at him, her face still cold but softening. "You are a strange human," she said, "but I see now that not all of you are the same." Jack didn't know how to respond. He had always been taught to see enemies as just that, enemies. But here, with the queen, he felt something different. Maybe it was the weight of the choices they had both made, or maybe it was something else entirely. Whatever it was, Jack knew one thing. This wasn't the end. No, it was the beginning of something much bigger, and he wasn't going to walk away from it. Not now. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty. Oh God. Jack and the Queen Zora had left the battlefield behind, had taken shelter in a small outpost hidden deep in the forests of the alien world. The planet was beautiful in its own way, with strange trees and glowing rivers, but Jack couldn't help but feel uneasy. Every day they moved further from the war and closer to an uncertain future. Jack couldn't understand it, but he found himself feeling something he hadn't expected. He had saved the queen, but now, as they hid together, Jack realized that he had no idea what came next. He had never imagined that his decision to spare Zora would lead him down this path. Zora, once a fearsome warrior, had become a different person in Jack's presence. She was quiet, withdrawn, often staring off into the distance. Jack didn't know what she was thinking, but he could tell that the events of the past few days had shaken her deeply. Leader, who commanded armies, but now she was something else, vulnerable. As they sat together around a small fire, Jack couldn't help but speak his mind. "You know, Zora," he began, "I don't understand everything about this war. I don't understand why we're fighting each other." Zora turned, her eyes toward him, her expression unreadable. "War is not always about understanding," she said quietly. "Sometimes it is about survival. I fought because I believed my people needed me. They needed a leader who could protect them." Jack frowned. "But at what cost? You've lost so much. I've lost so much." Zora's eyes softened. "We all lose, Jack. Every side loses. It's the price of war." Jack didn't respond right away. He stared into the fire, watching the flames dance in the cool night air. There was so much he didn't know about Zora's people. He had been taught to see them as enemies, to believe that everything they did was wrong. But now with Zora sitting beside him, he wasn't so sure. "What happens now?" Jack asked, looking at her. "What do we do next?" Zora took a deep breath, her gaze distant. "I don't know," she said. "I've lost everything. My army, my people, ... They're all gone. The war is over, and I am the last of my kind." Jack's heart sank. He'd never thought of it like that. Zora was right. Her entire world had been torn apart, and now she was left with nothing. "I won't leave you," Jack said suddenly, surprising himself. "You don't have to face this alone." Zora's eyes widened slightly and she stared at him for a long moment. She didn't speak, but Jack could see the conflict in her eyes. She was used to being strong, to being the one in control, but now she was unsure. "Why are you doing this?" She finally asked. "Why are you helping me? You've risked everything for me. Your own people are probably hunting you down right now. Don't you care about your own safety?" Jack shook his head. "I don't care about the mission anymore. I don't care about following orders, doing what I think is right. I can't be a part of a war that doesn't make sense. Right now, I can't leave you behind." Zora looked away, her expression hard to read. Jack didn't expect her to understand. He didn't expect her to trust him, not after everything that had happened. But he couldn't just walk away. The next few days were filled with more planning and more hiding. Jack and Zora knew they couldn't stay in the same place for long. They were both wanted by their respective sides. Jack's desertion had been noticed, and Zora's disappearance hadn't gone unnoticed either. The clock was ticking. Zora had taught Jack some of the alien ways. She showed him how to move through the forests without leaving a trace, how to survive on the strange food of her world. But despite everything, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The humans were coming. They would come for him, and they would come for Zora. And once they did, there was no telling what would happen. One evening, as they rested by another small fire, Jack couldn't help but ask the question that had been on his mind for days. "Zora," he said quietly, "why did you beg for mercy back there? Why did you ask me to spare you?" Zora was silent for a long time, her gaze fixed on the flames. "I didn't want to die," she finally admitted. "I didn't want to see everything I worked for destroyed, I thought. I thought that if I could live, I might find a way to make things right." Jack studied her for a moment, thinking carefully. You're not the only one who's lost everything. My people, my world. We've lost too. But we keep fighting. We keep going because we believe in something. We believe in a future where we don't have to fight anymore." Zora looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "And what if that future isn't possible? What if the war never ends?" Jack shook his head. "I have to believe it's possible, even if it's hard. Even if it means risking everything." Zora's expression softened. She looked at him differently now, as if she saw him not just as a soldier, but as someone who was more like her. Someone who had lost, and who still believed that peace was possible. "I don't know if I can believe in peace," Zora said softly, "but I will try. For you, Jack, I'll try." Jack smiled. Faintly. That's all anyone can do. Just try. As the fire burned down, the two of them sat in silence, the weight of their pasts heavy on their shoulders. But for the first time since they had met, there was a sense of hope between them. It was small, fragile, but it was there. The war had torn them both apart. But perhaps, just perhaps, they could rebuild something new. Jack and Zora spent the next few days moving through the thick forest, always staying one step ahead of their pursuers. Jack's mind was always racing. He'd never imagined his life would take such a turn, nor did he think he would be running alongside the very queen he was supposed to kill. Yet here they were, two enemies now, forced into an uneasy alliance, both seeking a way to end the war in their own way. Each night they would rest in a new hiding spot, always on the move, never staying in one place for too long. Jack had learned quickly how to adapt to the alien world, and Zora had become his guide through the dangerous wilderness. She was a warrior at heart, but her strength was slowly turning into something else. Trust in Jack, and perhaps even a hope that things could be different. One evening, as they rested by a quiet river, Jack sat with his back against a large tree. He was cleaning his weapon, while Zora sat nearby, staring at the water. Her face was thoughtful, and Jack knew she was struggling with her past. The weight of her leadership of the war she had started was heavy on her shoulders. Zora broke the silence. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, her voice quiet. "About peace? I never believed it was possible. But now? I wonder if I was wrong." Jack glanced over at her. "It's not easy to believe, especially after everything you've been through. But I believe it's the only way forward." Zora looked up at him, her eyes intense. I'm not used to trusting people. I've spent my life commanding armies, giving orders, making choices that affected millions of lives. But now, I don't know who I am anymore. Jack could feel the weight of her words. He didn't know what to say, but he understood. She wasn't just a queen. She was a person who had been shaped by the choices she made, and those choices had led her to a place of isolation. We're not so different, you and I, Jack said after a long pause. I've made mistakes too. I've killed people, fought in wars. But now, I don't want to be part of that anymore. I want to do something that matters, something better. Zora nodded slowly. But how do we stop the war now? Have nothing left to fight for. My army is gone. My people scattered. Even if I wanted to stop it, how could I do that? Jack's eyes darkened. We don't have to do it alone. There are others who want peace, people on both sides who don't want to. Keep fighting. But we need to show them that there's another way. Zora studied him for a moment. You think there are people on my side who want peace? Jack nodded. I'm sure of it. Not everyone who followed you did so out of loyalty to the war. Some are just following orders like me. You don't know who you can trust until you try. Zora's face softened, and for the first time in a long time, she smiled. It wasn't much, but it was enough for Jack to see that a small spark of hope had ignited in her. It was something he hadn't seen in her before. That night, as they continued their journey through the forest, they came across a small group of aliens hiding in the shadows. Jack's hand instinctively went to his weapon, but Zora stopped him. With a quick gesture, "They're not our enemies," she said quietly. "They're survivors like me." The group was led by a tall, older alien who had a stern look but didn't seem hostile. Zora spoke to him in their native tongue, and after a moment of tense silence, the leader nodded and turned to Jack. "We are the last of the rebels," the leader said in broken human speech. "We fought against the Queen's army, but now, with everything falling apart, we have no side. We seek a future without war." Jack felt a wave of relief wash over him. "That's what we're after," he said, stepping forward. "We want peace, but we can't do it alone. We need your help." The rebel leader studied Jack for a moment before speaking. "And why should we trust you, human? You were once our enemy." Jack took a deep breath. "Because I've seen enough of war. I've seen what it does to people, to families, to entire worlds. We're all victims here, and I'm ready to change that." Zora stepped forward then, standing tall despite the weight of her past. "I know what it's like to be an enemy. I led armies, but I never wanted to see my people suffer. I've changed, and I believe there's a way for us all to change if we're willing to fight for it." The leader looked between Jack and Zora, his eyes narrowing. Finally, he nodded. "We will help you, but we must move quickly. The humans will come for you both soon, and if we don't act fast, all of this will be for nothing." Jack and Zora nodded, agreeing to the terms. The group of rebels joined them, and together, they began to plan their next move. Jack had no idea how they were going to succeed. But for the first time since meeting Zora, he felt a sense of hope. They weren't alone anymore. Over the next few days, Jack and Zora worked closely with the rebels. They learned more about each other's people and shared their knowledge of the war. Zora helped them understand the alien perspective, while Jack showed them human tactics. Despite their differences, they found common ground in their desire to end the fighting. It wasn't easy. Trust was hard to come by, especially for Zora. She had once been a queen, a ruler who had commanded respect, but now she had to rebuild her life from the ground up. The weight of her decisions still haunted her, but with each passing day, she felt a little lighter. Jack had believed in her when no one else would, and she would repay that trust. One evening, they sat around a fire with the rebels. Jack spoke up. "I know we're not out of the woods yet," he said, looking at everyone around the fire. "But we're on the right path. If we stick together, we can end this war and give our people a chance at something better." Zora glanced at him, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Together," she said quietly, "we can rebuild everything." Jack smiled at her. Maybe the road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he believed that peace was possible. With Zora by his side, The days passed in a blur of preparation and quiet tension. Jack, Zora, and the rebels worked together, refining their plans and gathering what little resources they could. They knew the path ahead would be dangerous. The humans would come for. Jack and the remnants of Zora's army would surely track her down. But they had made a choice. They would not go down without trying to change the future. Zora stood on a hill, overlooking the small rebel camp below. The firelight flickered, casting long shadows across the ground. Jack stood beside her, watching. The same scene. The night was calm, but the air was thick with anticipation. "You're quiet tonight," Jack said, his voice low. Zora turned to him, her expression unreadable. "I'm thinking about what happens next," she said. "This is bigger than me, bigger than you. It's about the future of both our worlds." Jack nodded. "I know. I've been thinking the same thing. I didn't expect to be here, standing with you, trying to stop a war that's been going on for so long. I never thought peace was possible. Now with everything that's happening, maybe it is." Zora's gaze softened for a moment, and she looked away, staring into the distance. "I used to think I was the only one who could save my people. I was the queen. I had to lead them to victory. But look where we are now. Everything I built is gone. And now I have to rebuild from nothing." Jack placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone. You have people who want to help. We'll do this together." Zora looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "Do you truly believe this is possible? We can end the war and build something better?" "I do," Jack said, his voice firm. "We've come this far. We can't turn back now." Just as Zora was about to speak, the sound of footsteps approached. The rebel leader Kuro walked up to them, his face serious. "We've received word." Kuro said, "The humans are getting closer. They've begun to mobilize their forces, and they're heading this way. We don't have much time." Zora's eyes narrowed, but she didn't flinch. "We've known this was coming. We need to act quickly." Kuro nodded. "We've prepared as much as we can. We'll need to strike fast if we want to prevent the human forces from reaching us. There's a chance to catch them off guard." Jack looked at Zora, his expression steady. "What's the plan?" "We'll divide our forces," Kuro explained. "Some of us will stay behind to protect the camp and the civilians, while others will sneak into the human lines. We'll disrupt their communications and their supply lines, making it harder for them to move forward." Zora stepped forward. "We'll need to be swift. Can't waste any time. If we can get them to see that we're not their enemies, maybe, just maybe, they'll listen." Jack didn't hesitate. "Let's do it." The rebels quickly moved into action, preparing for the operation. Zora and Jack led one of the groups, while Kuro took charge of another. The air was filled with urgency, but there was something else, a sense of purpose. They were not just fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting for peace. As they moved through the forest, the tension between Jack and Zora was palpable. They worked in silence, each focused on the task at hand. Zora's leadership was evident as she commanded the rebels, and Jack did his best to follow her lead. They knew their actions would determine whether this fragile alliance would survive or fall apart. When they finally reached the human lines, they found themselves on the edge of a massive camp. The sounds of soldiers preparing for battle echoed through the trees. Jack's heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his emotions in check. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about making the first step toward peace. Zora gestured for everyone to be quiet, and they moved swiftly through the shadows. They reached a communications tent, where a few soldiers were stationed. Jack and Zora exchanged a look, and without a word, they moved in. Taking the soldiers by surprise, the first soldier barely had time to react before Zora disarmed him, while Jack quickly knocked out the second. They tied them up, making sure they wouldn't alert the rest of the camp. The rest of the rebel group went to work, sabotaging the communication equipment and setting up traps to delay the human forces. Jack and Zora moved through the camp, their presence unnoticed as they worked. The plan was going smoothly, and Jack began to feel a small flicker of hope. But as they reached the edge of the camp, they heard footsteps behind them. Zora's eyes widened, and Jack turned just in time to see a group of human soldiers approaching. "We're too close to run," Jack knew there was no choice but to face them. His hand went to his weapon, but Zora stopped him with a quick movement. "Wait," she whispered. "Let me handle this." Zora stepped forward, her posture tall and commanding. She spoke in a language Jack didn't understand, but the soldiers seemed to pause, confused. Jack could see the uncertainty in their eyes. They had been expecting an attack, not a confrontation with the Queen herself. Zora's voice was calm, but firm. "We are not your enemies. I don't want this war any more than you do. You have a choice. Continue the fight, or listen to what we have to say." The soldiers looked at each other, unsure of how to respond. Jack could feel the tension in the air, the weight of the decision hanging over them. Could either continue fighting, or they could listen. It was a small window of opportunity, and Jack knew they had to seize it. The silence stretched on. But slowly, the soldiers began to lower their weapons. One of them stepped forward. "We're not sure what to believe anymore," the soldier said. "The war's been going on for so long. Maybe it's time we listen." Zora nodded, her expression softening. "We all have to be willing to change. If we don't, there will be nothing left for us to fight for." The soldiers hesitated for a moment longer, then nodded. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start the conversation. Jack felt a rush of relief wash over him. Maybe this could work. Maybe, just maybe, they could end this war after all. As Zora and Jack turned to leave the camp, they knew the battle was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, they felt like they were on the right path. They had made a small step toward peace, and that was. The days after their risky mission were tense but hopeful. Jack and Zora had not only managed to stop a major attack, but had also begun to change the way both sides viewed each other. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As the human soldiers and rebel aliens began to question their roles in the endless war, Jack and Zora knew that the real fight was only just beginning. Jack sat on a rock overlooking the makeshift camp that had become their new home. The camp wasn't much, just a small group of tents and a few supplies, but it was safe for now. The fire crackled in front of him, the warmth of the flames offering little comfort against the coldness of the night. Zora approached him, her steps quiet in the soft earth. She had changed since their first meeting, and Jack could see the weight. There was something else, something different in her eyes, now a glimmer of hope. "We're not out of the woods yet," Jack said, his voice breaking the silence. "The humans will still come for us. There's no way they'll accept this so easily." Zora nodded, her face thoughtful. "I know. The road ahead is uncertain, but we have to keep going. We've shown them a way to end the war, but not everyone is ready to listen." "I know," Jack replied, rubbing his hands together. "We've made a start. And maybe, just maybe, it will be enough to change things." Zora sat down beside him, her eyes gazing into the fire. "Ever thought I'd be in this position? I thought that by defeating the humans, I would ensure my people's future. But now, I see that victory isn't just about winning battles. It's about finding a way to live together without more bloodshed." Jack turned to look at her, seeing the sadness in her eyes. "It's not easy," he said quietly. "But we don't have to do it alone. There are people on both sides who want peace. We just need to help them see it." Zora turned her gaze to the stars above. "I was so sure that war was the only way, that by fighting, I was doing what was best for my people. But now, I see how wrong I was." Jack placed a hand on her shoulder. "No one's perfect, Zora. You've done things you're not proud of. But we can change. We can help others see that it's worth trying." For a long while, they sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The world around them felt quieter now, as if the weight of the war had finally started to lift, even if only a little. The soldiers in the camp were still wary, unsure of what to expect. But the whispers of peace were growing louder. The next morning, Jack and Zora began their mission again, traveling through the forest to reach a larger group of rebel leaders. They needed to spread the message they had started, that the war didn't have to continue. They could rebuild something better together. When they arrived at the rebel headquarters, a large hidden base deep in the mountains, The leaders were waiting for them. The atmosphere was tense, but Jack could feel the change in the air. There was a small hope that had begun to grow in everyone's hearts. "We've come to speak of a future without war," Zora began, standing tall before the group. "I know you've all lost much in this battle, but there is a way forward. We can rebuild. We can end the fighting." The rebel leaders exchanged uncertain glances, but Zora continued, wavering, "We have to trust that peace is possible. We have to believe that we can find a way to live without this constant cycle of violence. It won't be easy, but it's the only way forward." Jack stood beside her, his presence steady. "I've seen the destruction firsthand. I've seen what this war does to people, to families. But I've also seen what we can do when we work together. We can change the future." The leader of the rebels, an older alien named Eris, spoke up. "You're asking us to trust you, to trust that peace is possible after everything we've lost. How can we be sure?" Zora met his gaze, her eyes full of determination. "I know. It's hard to believe. I know that after everything, it seems impossible. But if we don't try, then what's left? More fighting? More death? We've seen enough of that." There was a long pause, and Jack could feel the weight of their words hanging in the air. But then, slowly, one of the leaders spoke. "We're willing to listen," she said, her voice soft but strong. Maybe there's a chance." Jack felt a small weight lift from his shoulders. It wasn't a full victory, but it was a start. The seeds of peace were being planted over the next few days. They worked with the rebels to gather support for the peace talks. It wasn't easy. There were still those who believed that war was the only way to achieve anything. But Jack and Zora continued to push forward, talking to as many people as they could, showing them that peace was not only possible, but necessary. The human forces were closing in, but Jack and Zora had one final move to make. They would send a message to the human generals, asking for a ceasefire and a chance to speak. It was a risky move, and they knew that there was no guarantee the humans would agree. But it was their last chance. As Jack sat with Zora in their small camp that night, he knew that they had done all they could. They had given everything to this cause. Now, it was up to the leaders on both sides to decide whether to take the final step toward peace. "This is it," Jack said quietly, looking up at the stars. "We've done everything we can. Now it's out of our hands." Zora looked at him, a quiet resolve in her eyes. "No matter what happens, we've made a difference. We've shown that there's another way. That's all we can do." Nodded. "And if they don't listen, we'll keep fighting for that future, no matter what." The fire burned low, and for the first time in a long time, Jack felt a sense of peace settle in his heart. The future was still uncertain, but at least now